All right, good afternoon. My name is Ercilia Matobisi, and I'm with the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs. I'd like to welcome you to a brand new series that we've just launched, our G20 Entrepreneurship Learning Series. Now, the purpose of the series is to really just engage around the key topics on 4 specific engagement groups, hoping that that kind of broader engagement is going to help not just in the formulation and of the recommendations that go into the summit, but also for ourselves as players in the entrepreneurship space to be motivated and be engaged and partnered with other organizations that are doing similar work as we are to take those recommendations internally. So I am joined today as we do this. We just did our very first session, and it was a Y20 session. And I'm joined today by 4 fantastic young people, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. So, starting with you, Razan, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about you? So, who you are, where you are from, and as you came in here, what was the secret weapon you were bringing to the table today?
Thank you. My name is Razan Abnov. I am Sudanese American, born and raised in the States, Sudanese originally. And I'm with Anzisha, so I co-facilitated today. And I think what I brought was really just the position of holding space for the conversations today, and really allowing or encouraging the participants to speak from their perspective and envision an ideal world where youth are at the forefront of systems change.
Great. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Libwani Muledi, and I'm representing the Y20. I think today what I brought on behalf of the Y20 was not only my own ideas from the policy work that we do, but also just a proactive listening ear for all the ideas that were exchanged today to incorporate it in our policy reform work. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Do we have 2 Libanis in the room?
Is it Libwane or Libwani?
Libwani.
Oh, Libwani.
Yes,
Okay.
what I heard.
All right. I was going to say, hey, it's a party.
Hi, everyone. My name is Libwane Applegreen. I am from Alexandria Township. I'm the founder of Lumos Coffee Creations, which is a small coffee shop in Alexandria. And we aim to bring an alternative to alcohol-based shops that are around the township. So I'm also a 2024 Nzisha Fellow, part of the 2024 cohort. And what I brought in today was sort of becoming the voice of the youth, as I am young. I'm 21 years old, also in the space of entrepreneurship. So speaking on behalf of the youth and also the experiences that we've had that could potentially impact the decisions that the Y20 makes. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And then finally.
Yes. My name is Nkateko Manganye. I am an Allen Gray Fellow, but I also run a non-profit organization called Think Economics. And the whole premise of the organization is to get young people involved on issues of economic policy. So I thought this would be a great platform, not only to contribute my own perspective of the landscape of South Africa where entrepreneurship is concerned, but also to engage with other ecosystem members and hear what are some of those experiences that they draw from, and what can we as a collective recommend for the Y20, but also beyond that, what is the work that lies ahead of us that we need to do.
Okay. All right, fantastic. And I think that's, you just essentially summed up the whole purpose of this session. So this is fantastic. I want to highlight that, and the reason you are all in the room for this conversation and the reason we wanted to hear your voices is precisely because of that. So as Andy, we pride ourselves for being conveners and bringing different people into the room to have difficult conversations, but important conversations. And so, we're very happy that for this one, we got to partner with Y20 to, co-create this with you and to try to see how can we align to those conversations that are already happening. But we're also thrilled that in doing that, we got to partner with one of our members who is also doing incredible work in the very young entrepreneur space with Anzisha Prize. And so that partnership is, and that is like the epitome of, collaboration in the ecosystem. But someone said, actually, one of our speakers now towards the end said something that was really interesting. This is not the time when a young person can afford to sit back and say, politics is not for me. Mm-hmm. I loved that quote because then, the fact that you as young entrepreneurs are coming in and bringing this conversation and saying, I actually want to take the time to go in there and give input, to go in there and make change. So the whole idea is, as we're thinking about this, we hope that we are contributing to global policy. We hope. But we also have in mind that it's not just our voices that are counting here. It's the voices of your community. It's the voices of your generation. It's the voice of all of the African young people who are in this space, right? So I would love to hear from you guys. What jumped out? What stood out from the different conversations that you had, from the engagements that you had? So feel free. Anyone can go first.
I can go.
Yes.
There are a couple of things. And I think as a start, I think it's Dave, when he was encouraging us when we did the breakaway groups, saying that we shouldn't focus on the problems. And I realized when sitting in those groups that it's easy to dwell on the problems. And there is a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think what was so important was to force ourselves into the uncomfortable position of thinking a little bit outside of the frustrations that we have, because it's so easy to attach emotion to the issues, government, policymakers, and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think it was so important to emphasize that. What is it that we can bring to the table to recommend? One. Secondly, she mentioned that, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing your point, when we were doing recommendations of how, especially where township economies are concerned, how we bring those ecosystems back into those communities, because what happens is that we want to create a generation that of entrepreneurial thinkers, but also people who implement these ideas, but ecosystems are far removed from the communities which they serve. So what you end up having is almost the savior and problem kind of, institutions. So one is trying to solve a problem, but it's far removed from the community that they serve. And that's why it's so inspirational to know that she has a coffee shop in her own community. And I thought there's nothing more powerful than that. And I think those were maybe the two highlights for me coming out of this conversation.
All right. No, that's great.
I can go.
Yes, please.
One thing would be, I never really thought about how people actually go into spaces like this and think about solutions for us. We always see programs coming out, but we never really think deep onto how did that program come about. And also, I think the one thing that stood out for me is that when we were presenting, nobody brought in new ideas. We all reverted back to what we have. We just need to refine it a bit so that it works in our favor. So those were the two things that sort of stood out for me. As a young entrepreneur in the township, it makes me so happy that there are people that are actually trying to solve problems in our space, and I don't feel so alone anymore. It actually gives me the power to actually also take action as myself and make these things happen. So this was such a very insightful session.
No, I love that. And I love what you both just said, because Nkateko, what you're talking about in terms of like not sitting in the problem, and even the point that you made around this savior complex that more often than not we tend to have with township economies. And you made that point, Liboni, in the room. You were like, can we stop calling it informal settlements? Can we start talking about it? Oh, was it you?
Wrong
You made that point. Wrong Liboni. So Liboni, you made that point. And you said, can we stop talking about that and actually stop calling it economies? Because these are economies. And incidentally, well, not so incidentally, on purpose. Andy actually has been working in that space, advocating for exactly that. And one of the things that we learned in the last few years of that work was actually that we don't need to, which one of you said this? That we don't need to actually remove ourselves, right? And in fact, that there is work that is happening right there. And maybe some businesses are built for that community, to serve that community,
100%.
and that's where they want to be, and they have no interest in moving. So how do we actually start thinking about that and putting that forward, especially for young people, as a good, not an alternative, but a good path, right? This is, you can, building your community, what better thing could there be, rather than, it doesn't all have to float to Santon, she says, sitting in Santon. But you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't always have to be. And so I love that those are the things that kind of came out for you. I'd love to hear from you, from a Youth 20 cap, what surprised you?
I think the one thing that did surprise me is that usually when we're in spaces like this, we look at it from a universal perspective.
Yeah.
And for once, today's talk was surrounding youth primarily. And I think that's the mindset that we need to change, is that if we believe that the youth are the drivers for policy reform or policy change, then let's start fixing what's wrong with the youth first.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. And like I said before, charity starts at home.
Yeah.
Informal settlement, let's go, let's fix it in the informal settlements. Let's change that narrative. Let's change that notion. Let's say township economy. Let's remove that informal notion of it being incapable of doing things. And let's drive business where it thrives the most, in townships.
Moketi actually, from Youth 20, he actually said, we need a new language, right? So we need to start building a new language that speaks to, and that has youth at the center of it. And I have to say, you know, and maybe one of the best examples of this, and a good segue over to you on the NZisha work, Razan, is that centralization of young people in not just as recipients of programs. Here's a program, here's an accelerator, here's a, you know, growth path, jump into it, we will help you. I think we spoke a lot today. A lot of the recommendations spoke about 360-degree support. And I have to say that for me, one of the things that I still think are a challenge are, maybe I still struggle with the word support. I mean, there are spaces when support is needed, absolutely, by no means. But I think that, you know, to the conversations that we were having today, it's co-creation, almost, that we should be aspiring to, where young people are at the center of it. And we're asking young people, so what would work for you in your community? You're looking around in your community, what do you think could make change here, right? Rather than, we saw your problem, we have a great solution. All you need to do is sign up, we will guide you to it and support you. Because then when we remove, the thing about that word support is that when it's removed, now you're left abandoned, you know? Maybe you have built enough, good for you if you have. But then what if you don't? And do you want to go through a life without support?
No.
You know? So it shouldn't be something that is given to you with a time limit. It's almost like support is just what the ecosystem is, right? But co-creation around what my next step is, that should, and she says this like she's still youth. What, you know, that's almost, so I want to take it back to you. So you guys, how are you guys are doing a lot of this, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're doing this co-creation, this centralization on not just young entrepreneurs, but very young entrepreneurs.
Definitely. And I think, well, the age range that NZisha focuses on is 15 to 22. And often when we say 15, people are like, wow, I can't imagine my 15-year-olds starting a business. But with that age range, we really try to focus on advocating for their voice. And I think that really came in today with the session, kind of looking at the status quo of where we're at in the ecosystem and tokenized participation and where we'd like to be, where youth are actually at the center. And so I myself am still a youth, but many of my colleagues are outside of that age range. And I believe that as we strive towards the ideal scenario, it seems like the only opportunity is to really do your best to engage youth and give them a seat at the table, leading into that ideal scenario. And so I really like that setup of status quo, ideal scenario, and what's the delta. I have a research background, so I'm always thinking about what is the change, the gap that we need to address. And I think NZisha, we really try to put youth at the center of all of that change.
Yeah.
And not just when they're in the program, but really outside of the program, trying to engage alumni into staying engaged and mentoring other fellows. We have a mentorship program. And so, yeah, that's pretty much how NZSHA tries to allow youth, or not allow youth, but empower youth. And I think I really like what you said around changing the word support, because support kind of implies that these entrepreneurs need help. But what they really need is more opportunities, having a seat at the table to contribute to the systemic change and to actually lead that systemic change.
Yeah, that's what this is all about, which is why it's so inspiring to hear all of the voices. I did very little talking today because there was just so many good voices to listen to. So I don't know. I have no idea how we're doing on time. I thought I had set a timer, but I got so excited. I didn't. So there's a good chance we still have a lot more time here. But I wanted us to maybe, if we could then think about, what are you taking away back to your own space, sphere of influence, right? What are you taking back from this conversation today?
I think I could go. Well, what we were talking about is things that we know, but we never really thought of.
Yeah.
So this session actually brought it up. So, of course, what we taking away is, well, for me, is the ideas that I brought up.
Yeah.
Right? And as easy as it may be easy for me to start it back at home with just, I was just thinking that I know over 10 young entrepreneurs in my community that we don't really collaborate or talk to one another. We do know each other, but we never really collaborate. And this is my opportunity to actually start that change that I was talking about with the resources that we have, with the ecosystem that we have. It could just start as small as, I also thought about something funny, that when you start a business, you don't need a lot of funding. You just need one small thing to get you going. And I think it applies with everything. So with this systematic change, I just need one small thing, just one WhatsApp group where we share opportunities, where we talk about our challenges. That will then set us off.
I love that.
In the next 5 years, 5 years is a lot. In the next 2-3 years, it could be bigger than we expected. So yeah, that's my takeaway, or that's what I'm going to be doing when I get back home.
That's so cool, because I love that. It's like, I mean, because the axis was, you know, how hard,
how easy. Yeah.
how hard, how easy, and how long,
Yes.
right? And you're kind of saying there's a lot of things sitting here in the, I don't remember where is the quadrant now, of like very easy, very quick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Space. So yeah, so I love that.
Yeah, I'm stealing from your book. I think for me, what is important, it's more of localized solutions that have a grand impact. So usually we're thinking we want to do this thing that is so amazing, and then we become very abstract about how we're going to go about it. And I think for us, people like myself who write about policy, who write about, some of the challenges that we do experience and have some recommendations, is to always think about how to practicalize that for the community that is close. Because what happens is that once we solve a problem that is more localized, it snowballs into something that is bigger. So I think usually we want to be grand about it. So my part is to localize how I'm going about this, because I'm not necessarily in certain rooms. So we can cry about getting into rooms, right? And until you get there, there's something
What
that
are
you can
changing
do
where you
now.
are? Yeah.
So localizing how I go about practicalizing some of those recommendations, and then with the hope that one day, when I get into those rooms, I'll be prepared or better prepared to actually understand how to go about practical solutions.
I love that. I mean, it's great when you get invited into other rooms, but you already then come equipped with the experience that you have gathered exactly where you are. I love that. Okay, so.
I think from my side, firstly I want to start it off by a quote, and it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And I think being in spaces like this, it's a step forward.
Yeah.
And I think as for the Y20, we just want to we want to create more presence, to be in spaces where people that aren't considered youth anymore aren't comfortable with us being in those spaces and creating an even bigger voice. And I'm going to touch on what you said, so that when we create that presence, because I do honestly think we have the resources to be in spaces like that, so that when you enter those spaces or you enter those spaces, it's just a walk in the park for you guys.
Yeah.
And it's just to bring up, pressing topics that they don't want to listen to from the youth. So I think that's one thing that I took from today, is that there's a lot of us that are wanting to drive change, and it's beautiful because it's not just us. Globally, there's more than this. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love that global, that point that you're making, because I think that's very important to highlight. South Africa has the G20 presidency this year.
Yeah.
We are making history as the first African country to hold the G20 presidency. However, we are also the only African country to be in the G20 at all. So the conversations that are started this year are going to impact and should be and are relevant, not just to South African youth, but to African youth. And at that, youth of the global South.
Yes.
I think one very important thing to remember as well, and I'm going to throw this back to you, Razan, is that this is off the road trip, that the grand tour that the G20 has done into the global South. We're the last stop.
Yes.
It goes back to the global North next
Yes.
year, to the United States. And so everybody's really excited and interested and waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen. So the conversations we're having now, we need to try to see as much as possible how they can be institutionalized so that they're not easily dropped as it moves
Yes.
into a new setting and a new set of priorities. So Razan, your takeaway, what are you taking away that you are from this conversation today?
From this conversation today, and I think what you two are saying around having a seat at the table, and sort of G20 being a moment when the circus comes in and ultimately leaves. I think what's kind of ringing in my head today from this session is that although youth should have more of a seat at the table, I'm starting to think that youth should also be empowered to create the table.
Yeah.
And I think throughout history we see that youth have always been at the forefront of political change, of resistance, of revolutionary optimism. And I think for young entrepreneurs, they are envisioning a enterprise, they're envisioning a future that often people can't see.
Yeah.
And so I believe that from this conversation and after the South African G20 presidency is over, transitioning into, going back to the global North, I think continuing to have that revolutionary optimism, especially around youth, because Africa is the youngest continent. And there's young people around the world, United States included, from my own experience. There is still systemic change that needs to happen and economic transformation that needs to take place. So that's sort of what I have to say around the G20 presidency.
All right. Fantastic. I think that, that wraps it up really, really well. It sounds like we're going to go off. We're going to start a WhatsApp group with our fellow. We're also going to, start seeing, guys, what are we doing at home? And, I love that we're going to become carpenters and we're going to build our own tables and drag in our own chairs. And that we're also going to take this conversation and remind the elders that tough conversations are being had by the youth, but ultimately we need to be heard.
Yes.
Somebody said something really important this morning that touched me in the heart. I think it was Dave from Nzisha who said, in how long? 20 years? Half of you in this room are not going to be here. It's all going to be brand new faces of young people.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to know that the people that are going to be in that room leading and continuing those conversations, will have you among them to lead them. So super excited. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Thank you for joining us for the session today and for kicking it off for us. So with all that, I'm just going to wrap it up by saying, so if you are interested in hearing more about what's happening in these rooms and these conversations that we're having, these and more are actually going to be shared. We're going to be posting them on our LinkedIn page, the Andy Global LinkedIn page, as well as the Andy Southern Africa LinkedIn page. Follow us to know what else is going to be happening, and also check out the Andy Global website.